James Ehnes, welcome to Beyond Stage Fright. Now, you're an international concert violinist who has actually been compared to Paganini in terms of your technical prowess and your phenomenal control of your instrument, and of course your musicianship, which is of the highest level. You perform as a concerto soloist all around the world and a recitalist. You lead your own quartet, the Ennis Quartet, and you're the artistic director of the Seattle Chamber Music Society. And I know too that you've made about 40 recordings already. When you perform, you seem to have this aura of calm about you, and I wondered whether you've always had that.
That's a difficult question for me to answer. I know that I know how I feel, and I know that sometimes I feel very calm, sometimes less so. I think one can try to find reasons for why you feel a certain way at a certain time. People tell me that I always seem calm. Most of the time, I feel that way. Not always. I think that it's for me. It's an issue of not of simplifying. If what we do is difficult enough, and if we add extra sort of physical stress to what we're doing, it's only going to make the job that much harder. So I guess I take it as a compliment that I look calm. That makes me feel like I must appear to be in control of my body, in control of myself physically, which I think is a very important part of being able to achieve what you want to do at the instrument.
Would you say you ever have anything that's remotely like performance anxiety?
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, I think, and it's strange because I think that it's often tied into things that really have very little to do with the actual performance itself. I mean, I play all the time, so I think that first of all, that's the first thing that gives me an advantage when it comes to nerves. I think most people are this way, but certainly for myself, with anything in life, my comfort level increases with the amount I'm doing and the regularity with which I'm doing it. So uh, even in the course of a season, if December happens to be a little bit quiet because there's all the holiday pop shows and Messiah and things like that, so I'm maybe not doing quite as much playing in December. Then January comes and it feels just a little bit different to get back out there. Um, and at this stage, a lot of the places that I play are places where I've been before, working with musicians I've worked with before, conductors I've worked with before, playing pieces I've played before. So then sometimes when there is something less familiar to that situation, a new piece, a new venue, a new orchestra to work with, then yeah, that feels a little bit out of my comfort zone. And sometimes I feel a little more like, yeah, there's just that seed of something that comes into your mind. So yeah, I think there are very, very few people that don't occasionally feel that sort of thing, and I think there are a lot of people that feel it a lot more than I do, and I sometimes think if I were one of those people that was just sick with nerves before every concert, would I still do this or would I just give it up? I mean, it would be a difficult way to live one's life. If if you're well prepared, if you know the piece, if you know that you can do it, then there's nothing to be nervous about. If you don't, then there's lots to be nervous about. There's no magic answer.
No.
Everyone comes to their own solutions for so many things, and certainly when it comes to these mental issues, I mean, yeah, you can talk to 10 different people, and maybe one of those people says something that resonates with you,
Yeah.
and that's all you can hope for. I think that being able to speak openly about it is so important for everyone.
How much do you think is to do with really having a technical facility with the instrument that you've had for years? Because, I mean, you really had a phenomenal grasp of the violin from when you were very, very young. Do you think that's made a big difference?
As far as sort of a technical command of the instrument, um, I think that technical command and achievement is always linked to personal expectation. And I think that sometimes people that are very, very technically secure are that way because they have very, very high standards for themselves. So therefore, they sometimes put more pressure on themselves to be perfect, which makes it more difficult. Um, I think there are some people that when you hear them play, there's sort of natural ease to what they do, and maybe it's not all completely perfect all the time, but it leaves you feeling comfortable as a listener. Whereas I think there are some people that they make you feel like they're walking a tightrope the whole time. And while that can sometimes be exciting to listen to, sometimes it's actually really stressful, I think, to listen to people that it feels like they're on a tightrope and they can fall off at any point. So I don't know. All these things are closely linked. I don't know that one can be a really great technician on an instrument without being very, very, very self-critical. So in that sense, no, I don't know that it necessarily is a psychological advantage. I mean, also, I think that, if you're in a situation where, say, I'm playing a concert where I know there's a whole bunch of young violinists in the audience that they know where all the hard parts are and they have engaged me to play some super technical pieces, then in a way I think, well, if I miss any little thing, they're all going to go, as we live in this age of recordings where it's like if you don't like it, you can just do it again. So it's mind games, right? I mean, of course, that's what this is all about.
How do you manage the whole international touring scenario? Because you must be in and out of airports, hotel rooms, different concert halls all the time, different people, away from home, all of those things. How do you manage all of that?
Like I mentioned earlier, that a lot of it has to do with what you're used to in your life. I've been doing this for a pretty long time now, and I like my job. I like going to different places and seeing different things, meeting different people. Finding balance is difficult. I'm at a stage in my life right now. I've got two little kids that I want to be with all the time. On the other hand, those kids need new shoes and need to eat and all that, so I do have to actually have a job. Uh, Luckily, we travel around together quite a bit at this stage because my kids are really little, um, which is really great, but then also poses certain strange challenges because, if you're by yourself on the road, you have a concert that night, you can really design your day to peak at that time. Say I need to be at my best at 8 o'clock p.m. Um, then, sometimes if I'm on the road with my kids, it's like my daughter said, I don't want to wear that. I want to wear the pink one. I don't want to wear the purple one. I want to wear the pink one. And my son is crawling all over me, and somebody's sick, and somebody falls down, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, time to play Shostakovich Concerto or something. So that's an interesting challenge that I think has taken some getting used to. But the other thing that's very difficult is getting used to the pacing of one's career, where when you're playing one piece, when you're performing it, of course that is your world. Your world is whatever piece that is. But as soon as you're not rehearsing that or not performing that, in all your other time, you're thinking about next week, and that's something that I think is difficult to get used to for students that their life becomes, say, the Tchaikovsky concerto for a period of time, whereas I think when you're actually on the concert circuit, you're always thinking of multiple things at once and trying to balance that and figuring out how much time it takes to properly prepare for a piece so that you're as prepared as you want to be, but that you're not sick of it. For me, rotating repertoire is very, very important. I like to play a lot of different pieces in the course of a season. That's just a personal choice. I mean, a lot of my closest friends and colleagues in the business feel very differently. They would prefer to focus on just a few pieces, really immerse themselves. Say, well, this period of 4 months, I'm only going to play Brahms and Mozart 3 or something like that. But for me, there's so many great, even if you're just talking about concertos, there's so many great violin concertos. If you say that there's 40 unquestioned masterpieces in the repertoire, which is probably a conservative number. If you're only playing, 5 or 6 a year, think of how many years that is between playing these pieces. And then for me, that gets into that whole issue of comfort level again, where, if you haven't played the Elgar Concerto in 8 years, that's going to be pretty daunting to bring it back. So I like keeping repertoire in sort of a constant rotation because I feel it keeps me fresh, it keeps me on my toes, it keeps me technically well-rounded too. Of course, all the different pieces that one can play all develop different technical aspects of your playing, and certainly the amount of chamber music that I play with my quartet and with the Chamber Music Festival in Seattle, where I'm artistic director. I mean, all these things um, also, I think, make me hopefully a better rounded musician and a better rounded violinist.
I was going to ask you about your quartet because how different is it for you playing with a quartet from playing as a concerto soloist or recitalist? Do you feel more mentally relaxed in one form or the other?
Again, I would say it's what I'm doing more of at the moment. I just came off of sort of a 2 week quartet tour period, um, where certainly, even physically speaking, in terms of setup at the instrument, I felt more comfortable at the end than I did at the beginning because most of the time when I'm not playing chamber music, I'm playing standing up. And then when I play sitting down, I mean, that's a different thing. It's a very different physical approach. Um, but as far as the actual music making, I guess I've always felt like maybe I should say that they're more different than I actually feel they are. People seem to talk about, well, they're totally different worlds. Like, I'm not so sure they are. I mean, I think with any music, you're just trying to um, communicate this important message, or hopefully important message, and the method of communication is different in any piece that you play. But I don't think that I certainly don't find concerto playing and chamber music playing to be fundamentally different in any musical way. Of course, there are differences, but they're more similar than maybe some people might think.
Have you ever had things really go wrong when you're on the stage?
I think that one hopes that you can get to a point if where if things go as badly as they can go, it's still not that bad. I think consistency is so important. I mean, every concert I play, I think, well, I like this one a little better than that one, or maybe tonight was very good, or maybe tonight wasn't my favorite. Um, but I think that hopefully you always try to remind yourself that hopefully the audience is responding to you, and whether you're at your very best or really at close to your worst, you do sound like you, and you're doing what you do. A very good friend of mine, a cellist, Jan Vogler, we had this discussion years ago and really resonated with me, where we were talking about that kind of just horrible phase one has to go through of auditioning for conductors, and it's sort of I mean, I understand, a conductor wants to know who they're dealing with, and sometimes it can be a really wonderful opportunity to go in and play for some great maestro and get their thoughts. But it's a horrible experience almost all of the time, and it sets things off on a weird foot because, instead of being colleagues from the get-go, it's sort of like auditioning. And anyway, we got talking about this, and he made the very good point that from the first notes you play, whether it's a conductor or whether it's an audience member or a colleague, they know whether they like your playing or not. I mean, think about it. When I listen to somebody, I know right away if this is someone that, and it's amazing the things that I will forgive if it's playing that I like, and conversely, the things that I won't forgive if it's playing that I don't like. So, I think that though we always want every performance to be our absolute best, I think that if you can get to a level where you're always technically going to be more or less in control of what you're doing, then if you can just focus on being expressive and really showing who you are and how you feel about the music, then that's really what's going to come across. And anything that doesn't happen to go exactly how you want it to, the person who's going to be most bothered by that is you. And then it's your job to just get over it, I guess.
How do you find the recording studio for stress and nerves?
I find it very high for stress and nil for nerves. I guess I'd say that. I guess that depends. I think that concerto recordings can be more nerve-wracking in the sense that you have always less time than you wish you had. I mean, I think it's been probably a couple of generations since there was a concerto recording made where everybody felt that there was really just as much time to do it as they would have wished. Um, so that's different, particularly if you're making some sort of a live recording where, and of course that's it's one of the great inconsistencies of the music world. I almost goes as far as to say one of the great hoaxes. There are live recordings and there are live recordings, right? And people don't seem to realize this, that some live recordings are like, okay, flip the switch, turn it on, let's hope it goes well. Other live recordings are like 4 performances and a dress rehearsal and a patch session, and then there's not really any care put into describing these things for what they really are. But when I recorded the Mendelssohn Concerto, that was very much a case of, well, they put the mics on at the dress rehearsal. It was mainly kind of a balance rehearsal to get everything sounding approximately correct, but we did have some of that material in case we wanted it. And then there was the concert. And when the concert was over, we packed up. It was on a tour, and we just went to the next place. So that was it. And I know that when I play Mendelssohn Concerto, I know that I don't expect to mess things up. I've played the piece for a long time. I know what I'm doing, but still, I mean, anything can happen. So that's stressful. But then, in an actual studio, making a solo violin recording or a sonata recording or quartet recording, I think that it's stressful because you start to put so much care and so much focus into things that don't come across in a concert hall. I mean, the way that one has to play for a really beautifully recorded CD is very different than in a concert hall, and that takes an enormous amount of effort, physical and mental. But as far as the nerve angle, I mean, if you try something and it just goes extremely badly, that's fine because no one ever has to hear that. So in that sense, it's actually, I think recordings can be an incredible educational process for the player. Um, you can try things, and if you have the time, you can say, I'm going to try something, and then I'm going to listen to it and see if I like it. Um, of course, hopefully you have hopefully you have a very good idea of what you're trying to accomplish before you start the recording. It's not like you're there to experiment, but in terms of getting across the message that you already know you want to convey, that can be a very interesting process.
Do you find the need for perfectionism from the recording industry quite pressurizing?
No, I mean I think that if you're going into a recording, and whether it's your producer or someone from the label, or if there are other influences that are making you feel like it needs to be more perfect than you think it needs to be, then that's a problem with you. I think that your standards need to be high enough so that you're never second guessing someone else's motivations, I guess I'd say. I think it's a great thing that recordings give one, ideally, an opportunity to be at your best. I guess maybe people get confused about what being your best actually is. I would think being your best is expressing most clearly the message that you think is embodied in that music. Maybe sometimes people, less experienced people, I think sometimes being your best is just about dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. But ideally, in a good recording situation and with a great artist and a great recording team, you're not making concessions between those two ideals. When someone buys a recording, they want to hear a performance, but they also want to hear that piece. And so nowadays, particularly, I think if you're recording some piece of music, it's your responsibility for it to be correct as well as to be expressive. So, if you're playing a Beethoven sonata and you play a bunch of wrong notes in it, and you say, "Oh, but it's okay, it's very expressive." It's like, well, yeah, but somebody's buying this thinking that they're actually hearing what Beethoven wrote. So maybe you should make sure that you're actually doing that.
How do you keep your focus on stage?
Sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's not. And I have had interesting talks with some of my colleagues how, particularly in the sort of concerto world, like when you're playing with different conductors, there are some conductors out there that you just want to play for. And it's a mysterious quality that, speaking with friends, we can't really define what it is, but quite often we talk about the very same people that have that. Something that makes you want to play for them. There are other times when, in rehearsals, I would say, where you sometimes have to fight the urge to just kind of go on autopilot and think about what you're going to do that afternoon when rehearsal's over or something like that. But in a performance, I don't know, I think that it's just such a great opportunity to get to play this music. I feel very lucky that I get to do what I do and that I have been very fortunate to have the ability to do what I do, to have had the guidance to get me where I am, to push me to work, to develop my abilities. So I guess I just feel a responsibility to try to be in it. I think also, when I go to these concerts, all these people are there they're investing their time and their money. Concert tickets are not cheap, but it's the time thing. I mean, nowadays people don't spend 2 hours doing anything. They don't do that unless it's playing video games or something. Uh, so I just think I would feel really, really bad to think that I didn't at least try to do my best. There were some concerts where wish I played a little better, but I don't come out of concerts mad at myself for not having given it what those people deserve to get from me.
And what does it feel like when it's all going really well on stage?
For me, there's sort of a sensation that there's time for everything to happen. I don't know that I'd say like time slows down exactly, but just that there is sort of space for everything to happen, for your thoughts to be caught up with your actions. I think that the performances that are less comfortable are the ones where it's difficult for your thoughts to catch up to your actions, and things start to feel like they're running away from you a little bit or just moving fast. There are those nights where you feel just very confident that anything that you're going to try to do, you're going to achieve. And then there are the other times, the harder times are when you start to second guess things. Part of the problem for a lot of people, and I think a lot of students that maybe don't perform all that often, is the way they practice and the way they perform, their headspace is completely different. I think that for practicing, people get into this idea that it's a repetition. If you can do it to the point that it's automatic, then you'll be okay. And in a way, that's completely the wrong way of looking at it, because when you get on stage, nothing seems automatic. You know, you're focused on stage in a way that unfortunately many people never focus that way in the practice room. So they say, I don't understand it. You know, it felt so good and so easy in the practice room. It's like, well, you probably weren't really thinking about it. When you're out on stage and you're really thinking, then all of a sudden, all these questions come into your mind that you never answered. And so for certain types of pieces, you know, things that are technically quite intricate, um, when I practice them, I have to practice them in very particular ways where I'm the type of person where I like to think a lot about what it is that I'm doing. Once you get a level of consistency, I always want to know why. What is it that I'm doing, physically speaking, that is causing it to be right every time? Because then if you know, then I mean, that's half the battle. You know, I think that um, often, from a technical standpoint, there are within a very seemingly complicated passage, there are one or two, I think of them as like pivot points, where everything sort of hinges on that, whether it's one shift or one bow crossing, one articulation. And if you can analyze where those are and you know how to achieve them and how to make that happen, then that doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to do it every time. I mean, nobody is a machine, but it's going. If you know what you have to do, it just makes the process so much easier. Of course.
James Ehnes, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed talking with you.
Oh, thank you. Enjoyed speaking with you as well.